You can speed up your evolution and finding and embodying your authentic self by learning how to avoid common pitfalls on the spiritual path of self-discovery. So if you're at that place in life where you're ready to take your experience of life to that kind of next dimension, which ultimately is finding deeper meaning, purpose, and joy in life than your previous experience that might be a little bit more surface there, then you're in the right place. After having achieved a lot of like mainstream success in my life, I had a high paying corporate job at one of the top 10 companies in the world. My basic needs were met and more. I had time to do a lot of self exploration and learn how to drive. I was going on epic surf trips around the world, these amazing tropical destinations, going snowboarding for a season in Japan, and building a loving community of friends. I have had the sort of time and space to explore deeper truths and parts of myself, which has been a massive privilege in and of itself. And during this process, I slowly but surely outgrew my atheistic and my materialistic worldview, becoming a more evolved, more authentic version of myself that's found happiness and meaning to life that I just didn't know existed before. Now, there's a lot of paradox on the spiritual path. So make sure to become aware of this one that's going to save you years of wasting effort and a lot of confusion and struggle, which ultimately just slows down your evolution, right? So if you're passionate about exploring the nature of who you are and making the most out of your life and striving to grow into your full potential, then spirituality will eventually knock on your door. It's absolutely inevitable. And at some point, you'll realize that true growth it isn't found externally. It's actually deeply internal. And if it's internal by nature, it's then spiritual. If it's anything important in life, if it's about happiness, fulfillment, joy, and love, then it is spiritual. Imagine living a life free from fear and all the worrying and comparison. And instead, it's filled with beauty, adventure, and deep, deep meaning. The search isn't found out there, it's actually found already within you. It's waiting to be uncovered. Now, no one tells you about this paradox at the start, but I wish someone had told me. So let me show you what I wish I knew when I began this journey. So take a deep breath, soften your body, drop your shoulders, and open your mind for this. If you've ever found yourself having the thought or asking the question, what is spirituality? Then you should feel extremely grateful to have come upon this thought, this question. Because this question, and if followed, will lead you to know and be and experience and understand the meaning of life itself. It will put you on a path of love, an unconditional kind of love that you didn't know was actually possible. It will put you into a state of peace and fulfillment and unconditional happiness for no reason at all other than existing, that you just simply would never have known was ever humanly possible. And the spiritual path on one level is extremely complicated, and on another level it's extremely simple. So it really depends where you're coming at it from, how your previous experience in this life, maybe even just before this, but hey, about your conditioning, your upbringing, your family life, what you've seen in the media, the world, the news, all of it all plays into this fantastical tapestry of conditioning of into you. That's going to then determine, looking back at, how simple will the spiritual life be for you. But ultimately, if you found yourself asking the question, already now taking that really beautiful step in life, you know that there is so much more to life than what maybe you initially had thought or that you had initially experienced. So I have been on my journey in my path, for example, well, my whole life, but let's say on a spiritual path
whatever that even means. For me, it more means the path of growth, let's say it like that, of evolution. Since around 2018, when I read a few quote unquote spiritual books, I was piqued by I was curious and interested about their description and read them. Specifically, I have to give credit to Eckhart Tolle, which many of you have maybe already read these books as well. And hey, they were the books for me that really deeply shifted, or I like to think of sometimes deeply awakened something within me that now has kept being curious, has kept opening, and has led me further down this journey of life, the power of now, and then a new earth specifically. And then from there, falling down the rabbit hole of other teachers and teachings, then was introduced to Ram Dass, Be Here Now, and The Untethered Soul, Michael Singer, this kind of thing. And then I started meditating, and then one thing led to the other. And here we are, the end of the year 2024, and I'm making videos about sharing about spirituality, which ultimately is sharing about life, because I think it's so important and it's so beautiful, and it can just bring so much deep meaning and fulfillment and peace and love to your life. And hey, who doesn't want that? Because if you really think about it, right, regardless if you have awakened to existence or your existence as being connected to everything, or whether you're still just living identified as a separate individual self, regardless, we all want to be happy, healthy. You could even add on wealthy, and you can determine what wealth truly means for you. Let's just say it's obviously not just financial. But we all want to be happy and healthy, awakening or no awakening. And if you're watching this or listening to this, then my guess is you've already had some essence of awakening in yourself. And it's such a beautiful journey, but at the same time it can feel complicated. And I wish that in the beginning of my journey I had someone give me a little bit of a wider perspective and a wider framework to work from, to follow, without accidentally having all these twists and turns and confusion in the journey. And there's no real exact blueprint or map for this stuff. There's really not. Everyone's journey will be very unique to them, and that's exactly how it should be. So for a start, you just need to be extremely loving and compassionate and patient with yourself wherever you are on that journey. But ultimately, you've asked yourself, what is spirituality? And as soon as you've asked this, you know that you want to be happy. You want to grow into your potential, and you want to experience this life in beauty, in love, in connection. And it's just worth pointing out early on, for me, I wish someone had told me about, and I had learned about the ego, for example, being the separate sense of self who we think we are. And we are identified with thoughts, actually, because who we think we are is nothing other than a sort of tapestry of thoughts we have had, due to experiences we have had, due to emotions we have had, that start to firmly layer and layer inside an idea of who we think we are and what this life is. And when you identify with the ego, you're living in a sort of state of consciousness where you feel separate from everything else. Now, if we have separation consciousness on one hand, then the other experience, or the other hand, would be unity consciousness. So you're living from a state of being unified with all. And in that unity sense, there is a oneness to all things. And on the separate sense, there is individual forms. So the ego is essentially being identified with the activity of who you think you are. And again, this is based on your past experiences, patterns, beliefs. They all start to form this sort of thing inside of you. And it's not even a thing inside of you, it's simply just activity of the mind. But it becomes so deceiving that you think you are it, and you start to really identify with form. So if you ask yourself, who am I might say, I'm Robbie, I'm from Scotland, I'm XYZ, like my profession, I like this, I dislike that. All of these things outside of myself, I tie them all to me, and that's who I am. That's how I perceive myself from this state of being a separate entity in the world. Now, the opposite of that is knowing yourself as I am. So there's no I am Robbie, the name, I am almost 31 years old, the age, I am from this country. There's nothing after I am. It's I am. You're so much more than your name and the stories and the experiences you've had. They're all just things on the surface level of life that have happened, and hey, they're great. That's perfect. Absolutely beautiful. But going much further beyond and beneath that, and starting to really get into what spirituality is, it's starting to understand, experience, unfold, embody who you really are. And that starts with a sort of awakening to the realization that I'm not my body. I simply am having a human being experience. I have a body, I have a mind, I do have an ego. It's part of the human experience. But there is something else going on with me, in me. And beyond that is I am. Pure consciousness, pure being. So you are both a human being. And I wish I just knew this more clearly at the beginning of my journey to save me a lot of time and maybe confusion, that in this human experience, I am human, and I do have this ego is part of my reality. But I also am being, pure being, which is no longer ego or separateness. It's wholeness, it's fullness, it's connection to all things. And all things together is one thing, right? And that one thing is divine in nature. It also is nature. Divine is nature, nature is divine. And we, as humans, are a part of nature. We are life itself, expressing itself through itself. And this is why, you maybe have heard this before, but we are an aperture of the universe experiencing itself. And how beautiful is that? Or we are the vehicle through which God is knowing itself through our own unique individual experience. And once we can get beneath the separateness, we can touch a place, we can come to the realization of a place within us that is pure consciousness itself. And that pure consciousness is everything that is. And on that train of thought, consciousness is everything. It is everywhere at all times, in all places. It is simply flowing through us. Our nervous system, our brain, is the vehicle for the consciousness to then come in and to start to know itself. And on this path and in this journey, starting to more and more know who you really are and become who you really are is the end of the separate sense of self, the separation consciousness, the ego. At some point, that ego is no longer going to have its hold on you. It might take weeks, months, years, lifetimes, but as soon as you awaken to this, that actually is the end of it for the ego. Now, it's just a matter of time, a matter of practice, a matter of dedication and devotion to this beautiful thing called life, that we will know ourselves as unconditional happiness, peace, fulfillment, love. In the end, we just have these words to point to the idea of what it really means, but what we're really talking about here by unconditional love or God or the I am presence, all of these are simply words, and none of them remotely come close to being able to describe what that really is. Because what that really is goes far beyond the human brain and evolution and intellect's version of that. So it's so vast and profound that it simply cannot be talked about through words of a human talking about it. It can only be directly known, directly experienced within. And coming to this realization is one of the most beautiful things, because it will start your life as now this beautiful unfolding adventure of a lifetime of coming to know who and what you truly are, and embodying that and bringing that into the world, and bringing, and it sounds, I used to think it sounds so cheesy, this love and light. I send you love and light, you know, like can feel a part of my individual separate identity being like, ugh. But like, that's fine. Maybe I just don't want to talk about it that way, but it is actually love and light. And it is just like this sun shining on everything. It's like we, as this individual human, are having this human experience as a ray of the sun, but we are also the sun itself. And this path of spirituality, just be very careful. And I wish, again, I had known this earlier, but on the path of fulfilling your potential or becoming your true authentic self, on that path, there's sort of two paths, two ways to get there, they say. The direct path and the indirect path. Now, the indirect path is where most of us start our journey, because it's just not possible to go from living your life in a way of separation, in a way of feeling, only identified with me as an individual self, as my intellect, only sort of believing or seeing the physical world. It's too much of a jump to then just go to the direct path, which is basically knowing yourself as more than just the physical world, more than the relative world, but the absolute, which is both the physical, the non-physical, both the mind and the matter. It's too much of a jump for our system, for our ability to do this. So we have to start with things like finding meditation, for example, or yoga, or breath work, or journaling, or shadow work, or these practices and things that we can do to indirectly start being on the path of knowing who we are. Now, there's nothing wrong with these things, and they're all great. They're all a very important part of our path. But for most people, when we're doing them practices in the indirect path, we must be made aware that in that way of living our life, we are still identifying ourselves as a separate self that needs to be improved. I need to meditate more. I need to become kinder and happier, and I need to be more spiritual, and I need to do more retreats, or I need to do plant medicine so I can grow and become a better version of myself. There's still a separate self at play there, and it's still trying to improve. And in some way that is relevant and important and helpful, but in another way we're missing the point that we're still living in that separate sense of self, because when you're not separate, you're connected. And when you're connected, you're at one. And when you're at one, you are the universe experiencing itself. God energy is living through you. And of course, nothing can be improved about that. It's already free. It's already full. It's already fulfilled. So don't get too caught in the indirect path, still living as a separate being, because the person that's trying to improve itself is already full, you're already free, you're already here now, perfect. But it's not possible to just jump to that realization or that knowing. It just can't be like that. And in my own personal experience, I certainly couldn't start like that. I had to start with the smaller little bits where I had my initial awakening and read these books and then started learning more about it and podcasts, and you start to feed your intellect all this stuff. But then after the intellect, you need to start also experiencing these things. And that's obviously in my journey, that's where meditation came into play, where I started to learn about deeper parts of who I am and what this is, and this beautiful gift of life and consciousness itself. And again, they're all still practices, and I've been practicing because there's still this separate sense that needs to get better, until at some point down the line, eventually, I will be free and full and whole. And that's the paradox. You already are that. So the journey, the path, the destination, you already are it. But it's hard to jump to this realization without the indirect way there that starts to clear up the way of being able to know this and live this. And to just know that you are a human being, which means there are human qualities to your existence, and they are part of the process. Learning and understanding about who you are, your ego, the separation, really the mind and all the activity, and that there's that part of you. There's nothing wrong with that. that's perfect as it should be, but there's also the being part to you, the human being, and that being is deep presence of existence, of life. And then so many words can express what that really is, but it's love, it's I am, it's God, it's nature, it's the universe, it's all of them things is pure being, it's pure consciousness, the Atman, Samadhi, moksha. So to know that you are both at the same time a human being, you have humanity to you, you have divinity to you. And then you recognize you're a spiritual being having this human experience lived through the individual of I. So just remember on your path to not get too blindsided by thinking to do all these practices, because ultimately the person that's trying to get better, that's your ego. Your ego wants to improve, and there's nothing wrong with that. But just remember that that is the magic door. Beneath that, there's still an element of separation. And ultimately, as we evolve, we'll stop identifying with the separate self that needs to get better, and we'll start identifying ourselves as the isness, the I am, nature, universe, God, love, all them things. Like, that's what we are. And as we can start to integrate and infuse that in our humanity, so as we infuse the being in our humanity, that is us living our authentic selves and being guided by the beautiful creative force of nature that's coming through you. That is you. That is the gift of you. That is your unique and beautiful being that's meant to be here. So, thank you for life expressing itself through me. And again, this path, the indirect or direct, it doesn't matter. It's just the fact that you have found an interest or a curiosity, or there's something inside of you, however big or small, that is a massive, massive blessing. And you should really count your blessings to have found that within yourself. And hey, follow it. And don't stop following it, because it's ultimately what's going to give your life true meaning, true joy. And before you have that, you're so identified with the intellect and with the mind, and that you're just life form and evolution's taking place, blah, blah. But hey, if you go just deeper, it's not a thing you can intellectualize. It's simply an inner knowing, an experience of, oh wow, I am so much more than this individual human. I am this divine being connected with everything and everyone. It's so beautiful. And that's what's going to bring you the unconditional love, the happiness, the purpose. That's why you're here. So the spiritual path is actually why you're here. So if you found yourself listening to this, watching this, and resonating and thinking, well, okay, yeah, you've already had such a beautiful gift to have known this, and now it's up to you what you do with that, how you proceed. And if you've enjoyed, I'd love to invite you to join our community where we do this together, because that's ultimately the fun of it, right?